Cyberpunk Uncensored.
Hey, what's up? We're officially live. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Actually, it looks like audio is not going through. Let's see. I'll wait for chat to give me the what's up. Make sure everybody can hear me. Can everybody hear me? All right. Cybersmily, say something. Let's check the audio with everybody watching.
Hey guys,
Nice. All right, cool. I can
how's
hear.
everyone doing?
Yeah, sorry for that little stumble in the start of the stream, everybody. But we have been having some issues with OBS and Twitch and stuff. Some of the audio wasn't coming through before, and I had to kind of reset things. So I wanted to check before I fully started running my mouth. But apparently you can hear me, so here I go. This is Cyberpunk Uncensored. This is the official deep dive on solos. I do a complete series of deep dives with different guests and friends joining me, and yeah, we basically deep dive each role. We talk about all kinds of stuff. We don't get into the crunch. You know, if anybody wants to learn about the crunch and how solos work and all that good stuff, you know, be sure to check out, the crash course tutorials I have. I get into, the rollability and all that good stuff. This series, the deep dive, it's more about, we're going to discuss the life path, archetypes, recommended stats and skills. We'll take questions from chat, things like that. It's a lot more fun, a lot more, about the style. It's a lot more stylized, I guess you could say. But yeah, before we get into it, I want to introduce my guest. I have a guest with me that's also a friend. I'm a fan. Cybersmily, a lot of you probably recognize him from online for a long time. He's been part of the community even before people were streaming and getting out there with it. He was already putting shit out and helping the community before it was a thing, I guess you could say. And now I'm lucky enough to have him as part of the Cyberpunk Uncensored team. Him and Derek of Data Fortress, they do the Tales of the Forlorn Dopes. If you haven't seen that series, check that out. But yeah, Will, why don't you just tell people about yourself, a little bit of background, your website, all that good shit, where people can find you.
Sure, I'm Will, aka Cybersmily. I created a site called Cybersmily's Data Fort. You can find that on cybersmily.net. That site I've kept for quite a while. It started off as like an area to display some of the house rules for Cyberpunk back in back when we were playing 2020. And then it just evolved as my skills evolved to start creating applications and like little utilities to help with games and running your game. Like, so there's character sheets, there's combat tracker, net running stuff, whatever little rules there might be in those books. I kind of tried to convert it into some type of utility that can be used. As well as getting some lookup data there. So you can go there, look up for cyberware, all the 2020 stuff. I'm going to be working on the red stuff, hopefully in the near future, especially when Black Chrome comes out, but always working on little bits.
And you've already been helping Red. I know you did the, like the net, the system generator, things like that,
Yep.
But I'm excited to see you dive more into it and provide more of those great tools and resources. That being said, I just want to give a little plug for cyberpunkuncensored.com. We have a bunch of free resources there and links to all the different things that I have going on, a bunch of live streams, things like that. The main thing is please give a follow and a subscribe and all that good stuff on Twitch and on YouTube. Cyberpunk Uncensored is on both Twitch and YouTube. Whether you're seeing this live stream or you're watching the VOD on YouTube, shoot over to Twitch or YouTube, give a sub, give a follow, all that good stuff. I would really appreciate that. We also have active Discord where a lot of people network, hook up, GMs, players, lots of gameplay, so check that out. And get into some gameplay. I want to give a shout out before we get going to my main Patreon supporters. I have a lot of supporters there with all hey, thanks Chuggy for the sub there, man, and gifting out 5 of them. Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate that. And everybody should check Chuggy out. He does a lot of stream stuff too. And I know we've shared it on the Discord. Yeah, I have a bunch of cool things on Patreon. One thing in particular is shout outs to some of the supporters, and I want to take the time to do that. William Huddleston and Naomi Madlass, they're playing in my monthly gameplay. This Wednesday is our session 2 of that, also with Wandering DM, a bunch of friends and stuff. You should tune in and check that out. Anino Gaming, Leaded Coffee. Leaded Coffee actually also does the NPC tier on Patreon. I'll be debuting an NPC that he created on an upcoming stream, maybe this Wednesday. Michael Edmonds, who's also Kira in GM Reservoir Panda's game. Chris Anderson, Dolan Pondsmith, who's an artist. She's also a Pondsmith. Check her out. She's got her own channel in our Discord where we showcase her art. So check that out. Steve Barr from Sirenscape. Sirenscape is an official sponsor here at Cyberpunk Uncensored. I'm going to get some sounds going on that here in just a moment when we start the official deep dive on the solo. Matt James, who's also GM Reservoir Panda, shout out to him. He streams with us every Friday and Sunday. And Cybersmily, you play with his stream on Fridays, right?
Sundays.
Or Sundays, I had it wrong. Awesome.
The choombas.
Exactly, the choombas series. That's on season 2, so everyone join that. Check that out. Revolver Gray, Samurai Mac, Jorge, and Zach, who's also Capricious Nature here in the chat, who helps out the Scream Sheet project. He helps me with all kinds of stuff on the Cyberpunk Uncensored Discord and in the community. He created the Vehicles of Red supplement that you can see on our site, which everyone should check that out. Plus, he's going to be starting a stream starting here in July. He's starting a nomad-themed campaign with us. It'll be a weekly stream on Saturdays, I believe, so check that out. Okay, enough jibba jabba, enough promos and all that good stuff. Let's get into the solo deep dive. I'm going to start some Sirenscape sounds. I'm just going to dive into their Forlorn Hope sound set and just get right into Trouble on the Dance Floor with some firearms. So apparently you're in the club, you're hanging out at the bar, and there's just trouble on the dance floor. Just people are starting to fight. You can hear things kind of getting going. Yeah, and anybody watching the live stream, if any of the sound effects start overwhelming the stream, just let me know. I can lower the sounds. Otherwise, I just love that shit going on while we chat. Yeah, so anybody that wants to follow along, hit up page 56 of the Cyberpunk Red rulebook. That's where we're going to start. As everybody knows, Cyberpunk Red has an amazing life path system. You basically roll all your background stuff, and it explains kind of where you're coming from, what you're about, all that stuff. But Red has specific role life paths that you can get into, and it's so exciting. And that's what kind of sparked my idea of doing this deep dive series. And yeah, let's start there. Let's start with the solo life path. So after you do the general life path, you're going to follow this solo life path. And Cybersmily, if you want to kind of take us through that, yeah, let's go for it.
So with the life path, right, you roll to determine what general solo you are. So there's, a bunch of different categories, and I don't know. Rob can correct me or not how much I can actually say about the tables when it comes to the homebrew.
The what?
Well, I wasn't sure about the homebrew stuff, whether we can say what the values are within the tables.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We can read the tables from the rule book direct, and then if there's any homebrew, any things to add or ideas, absolutely, yeah.
Right. So first off, you kind of roll for the type. The types that they have listed are bodyguard, street muscle for hire, corporate enforcer, corporate or freelance black op agent, a local vigilante for hire, or an assassin hitman for hire. So those are just the basics, but I think you could also include several others, such as a veteran from previous war, or just getting out, getting discharged. Also, there was bodyguard, or not bodyguard, bounty hunter is also a role that could probably fit into a solo. And the other thing, I think, not only could you be a corporate enforcer, but you also might be part of a nomad pack, being the muscle for a nomad pack. So there's a bunch of other options that I think you can expand the list of the types if you needed to. Rob, do you think you have any other different rules?
Yeah, one of the things I was going to mention when we got into archetypes, you just kind of tapped into, was bounty hunter. I really liked the idea of that. I was going to bring up kind of like Dog the Bounty Hunter almost has like a crazy cyberpunk, retro 80s futuristic vibe between his mullet and clothing and all that shit. Like I was going to bring up that, but I love that you've got more than just bodyguard there. And again, anybody in chat, if you ever have ideas on this and expansions on any of these sections or things we talk about, please interject it in, put it out there. We have the chat as part of the stream, so we'd love your ideas as well.
And another role that you could actually use is kind of a professional fighter, right? Whether it's MMA, a boxer, street fighting, or some type of basically person who's just combat oriented, right? And it's more of a part of the spectator sport. And again, with some of these roles, you can blend into other roles, right? To get a secondary role. So like a professional fighter might also take in some rocker levels, right? To get like an audience and start getting a following. Bounty hunter, you might want to go into, lawman or even fixer to get some abilities to work on the streets, So there's a lot of fun stuff you can actually play with when it comes to the solo role.
Yeah, a lot of multi-classing potential right there that you named. I love that.
Yeah. Then what you get to roll is your moral compass, which is always working for good, trying to take out the bad guys, always spare the innocents, occasionally slips and does unethical or bad things, but it's rare. You're either ruthless and profit-oriented, and you'll work for any money, willing to bend the rules and the laws to get a job done. And then there's just totally evil. You engage in illegal, unethical work all the time. You actually enjoy it. Some of these moral compasses, I don't know if would probably play into your empathy, especially for your starting empathy, right? So if you start off as kind of a less caring about people person, your empathy is probably going to be a little lower than the average. So with this role, you could actually reflect how your empathy plays into it. Or it could be the amount of cyberware you've implanted, right? And this has kind of turned you into your moral compass, because your humanity has just been eaten away by the tech.
Oh yeah, no, and that always seems like that's the common too, and I guess most promoted, and like on a GM side, like at no matter how players want to play, and players, no matter how they start off, they tend to kind of let the game dictate their reactions sometimes, and it almost develops the character as time goes. I always think that because they might go into it like, I'm going to be a good guy, I'm going to do this, and then they realize quickly how the dark dystopian future is. Like sometimes you have to break the law to help the good guy and shit like that, So eventually you start finding all these, moral gymnastics to go through and shit, and then you develop who you are. And I always think that part of that is, your morals driven by the humanity loss,
Yep.
Your empathy being affected by cyberware and shit like that, and in Red, by things you see and do. Let's not forget that your humanity loss can happen because you've seen some really fucked up stuff, or you've been through some hard times that actually made you lose humanity. I think that's great. I mean, not great to have to go through, but a great, function of the game,
Right. Yeah, and that's the one thing that helps you define your character, right? And how you can play into it. Like, so with the Reservoir Panda game, I'm playing their solo, and, I rolled Ruthless Profit Center, right? Which kind of played into some bit of his other life path, right? So one of his other parts of his life path is his girl got kidnapped, right? And there's a ransom. So that kind of drove him into acquiring money and doing whatever is needed to get that money. also in the in his life path, he also wants to get completely off the streets, which again pushes him towards those money. And for me, it's the character doesn't like what he's doing, but he knows that this is the path that he has to choose to go through that.
Oh yeah.
And it can bring up really interesting role-playing aspects with your moral compass and how you play it with the GM, you know?
Oh yeah.
As for the last one, the total evil, that can get complicated, especially for a group, right? If you're total evil, right, that means you're willing to not only screw over NPCs, but possibly the players. And that can always lead to some not fun games for some people. So you always want to make sure you balance that out when you roll that and talk with your referee to discuss, hey, how do I play this out? But again, you know, some evil people have, you know, principles, right? They don't screw friends over. They don't do certain things just because it's part of their behavior. So it doesn't mean you're a total dick, but you need to think about how to play that out and how it's going to work with the group you're playing with.
And that's just it, you know. I think if you're going to go that extreme, and I think it works both ways, you know, if you're going to be extremely good guy, always following the rules, you know, your moral compass is always on the right, you know, that sort of vibe, or you're totally evil, and no matter what it is, I think you have to discuss it with your GM if you're going to go that extreme with it, that far on either end of the spectrum, because like you said, it has to make sense to the team. You can't just be that, you know, that guy that the team is always fighting with you. You're always trying to steal from them or, you know, kill them to get the upper hand. That'll stop being fun immediately, you know. So I think if you find some way to make it work, like Cybersmily was saying about, you know, maybe you don't screw over friends or family, or you tie in life path, you have it make sense that the team isn't part of that, you know, taking the evil brunt of your force, so to speak. But I also think another alternative, and I've seen a lot of, I haven't done it in teams I've run or whatever, but doing a whole team that kind of aligns like that. I've seen some friends do that, and it worked. I've also seen it on a stream before, where like the whole team is evil, or the whole team is, you know, outrageously good, you know, and they make it work because all of them are aligned like that. So, but yeah, you just got to be flexible and think outside the box sometimes to make those things work. Otherwise, some of those extremes can, you know, make sense on paper, but not at the table. You know what I mean?
Right. And if you do go, you know, I think evil players are definitely a tricky thing. Good, aren't, you know, they can work. They work a little bit better in group dynamics, but evil characters can always cause a problem.
Yeah.
But again, also remember that evil people will keep other people around to protect themselves, right? And use those people to further their own ends. And have them around. So it's not going to be just, hey, I'm going to screw over everybody. So
right.
You can definitely bring it in, or bring certain dynamics to the group. Even the rest of the players might not know you're evil. It's just how you play it. And also, like Rob says, definitely work with your referee.
Yeah. And I wanted to mention too, you know, thanks Captain Mark for the follow earlier. I did see your comment. Solo plus rocker boy equals professional wrestler, and I wanted to mention, if anyone hasn't seen a Nino who plays Jimenez in the Wandering DM Cyberpunk Red gameplay, he is just that. He's a professional wrestler and absolutely has that solo rocker boy vibe. He's a rocker boy, but it absolutely feels like that multi-class when you see his skills and work in action, I should say. And he came over and appeared in one of our games on the Cyberpunk Uncensored channel, and it was a lot of fun. But yeah, anybody else, you know, feel free to interject ideas into the chat, and we'll pull them in. But yeah, let's go on to the next section of this life path.
Yeah, well, one thing Furious George. I don't know where the word solo came from. I don't know if it came from Han Solo. I don't know the or was it the etymology? I forget the exact word, but you know, the root of a word. I know that back in the 80s there was a movie called Solo with who was that actor?
I remember that.
He was in New Jack City. Mario.
Mario Lopez. No, I'm kidding.
No, it wasn't Mario Lopez. It was man, what was his name? Anyways, but yeah, so I don't know exactly where the term actually comes from. It could come from Han Solo, because that came out in the 70s. So it'd be interesting to look that up.
Yeah.
So moving along to who's gunning for you. So for a solo, you might have somebody hunting you down, such as a corporation you've angered, a booster gang you may have tackled earlier, corrupt lawmen, or lawmen who mistakens you or mistakenly thinks you're guilty for something. And for a solo, it's probably true. A rival solo from another corporation, a fixer who sees you as a threat, and a rival solo who sees you as their nemesis. And again, you can expand this into other things, right? So crime organization might be gunning after you solo. If they were such as an assassin or street muscle, they could have pissed off some organized crime syndicate.
Oh, yeah.
Nomads, right? A nomad family could be gunning for them.
Yeah, I was going to say they kind of left out some good things. You know, there could be, and maybe not a corporation or something that's typically thought of as like negative, but maybe there's an organization or something positive, and a solo just inherently being a killer or hitman, even if doing a job for a good, still has to kill people or do something bad. Maybe there's a good organization, or you know, a church or religious group or something that is gunning for him. Maybe there's a political party or some type of political entity or something along those lines as well.
Yeah, so even though there's 6 on the chart, you definitely want to think about maybe expanding it for your own games, just to give it a little more flavor.
I like how it's so many rivals and stuff, you know, just because,
yeah.
I mean, what a solo is, you know, they're the ones, you know, throwing bullets and blades around Night City and shit. So like, they're obviously going to be picking up a lot that rival vibe. So I love the fact that they have, you know, a rival solo, a fixer, you know, rival solo who sees his nemesis or from another corp. It absolutely has that vibe, I think, when you think of solo. Because like I said, you could even be doing a good job. You know, you could be like a good guy, and you're still you're going to have to protect the good guy by killing some bad guys who's going to have family or people that are going to care about him, or someone's just going to look at that like you're killing in general. It's bad, you know. So I think no matter what, like just being a solo, you're more prone to you're almost set up for failure when it comes to like enemies. You're going to have a lot of them, you know.
Yep. And of course, you're definitely having one enemy, even though you might not roll any in your regular life path. You're definitely going to get one. And I think solos is kind of the one. No, there's 2 or 3 other careers that actually have others that are gunning for you. So solo is not alone in making enemies, apparently.
Oh yeah, almost everybody.
Yeah. So the next.
Yeah, go for it. No, I was gonna say the next section.
Yeah. So the next section is your operational territory. It includes the corporate zone, combat zones, the whole city, the territory of a single corporation, the territory of a particular fixer or contact, or wherever the money takes you. This also could apply to like the Badlands. If you start doing a space game, right? It could also be in the what the various areas within space are, right? So not only do you have the high riders floating around, but you also have the various space stations, right? Like Crystal Palace. You also have the moon base. So, and I don't know what happened to the colony on Mars, but there is definitely was a colony forming on Mars. So there's a lot of areas in which the solo could operate, not only on Earth but also in space. And you could also apply this to ocean, right? So, yep, oceans and seas.
Yeah, there's the deep divers that are down there. They're living in those communities on the, on the bottom of the ocean. You could work with that. There's floating
cities.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of people don't. I think space and water. Those are the two. I think you see so little of. People don't tend to think of that as much. But yeah, you can push them. It doesn't always have to be the city.
Yep. So that's it for the life paths. And again, you can always play in with the life path, your regular life path, into this, and why you became who you are, or integrate some of the friends you generate or the enemies you generate in your normal life path with the archetype you are, right? So as a bounty hunter, you probably cross some people who are looking to get some revenge on you, as they were ex-bounties that you brought in. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do and interplay with the life paths.
Oh yeah, that's what I think. Somebody in the chat said it's like their favorite part of Red, and I absolutely agree. It's so much fun. And if you ever seen one of my session zeros, which anybody watching, check out the live streams where I do my session zero. We archive them on the YouTube. That's a huge part of it, is going over the life paths of each of the players, elaborating some of those things so it makes sense and it brings it to life. It gives depth to the characters. And then, like you said, tying in life path to specific role life path, and the most fun part, tying it to the other players, finding little things like, oh shit, I have something, I have a similar type of enemy. Maybe both of us crossed paths at that time because of that enemy, or or lover, or this or that, or whatever. But yeah, I think that's a key part into tying your character into the world that you're about to start playing in, and with the other players that you're playing with. It just gives such depth. But yeah, I think we nailed the life path. That was a great job. Anybody in chat that's watching, keep in mind, as we move on to the next things we talk about, the next sections, we have no problem backtracking and talking about something that we already mentioned. So if you have a comment or something pops in your head, oh shit, I forgot to mention this when they were talking about that 10 minutes ago. Go ahead, put it in chat. Doesn't matter. We can bounce around, talk about Cyberpunk all day. Doesn't matter. Love it. But let's get into the different archetypes. Different examples from film, TV, comic, books, anything like that. For me, I think that the most famous ones, or I think in modern, obviously everyone thinks of stuff like John Wick and Han Solo and things like that, like the traditional, most famous, iconic stuff. But I really like Takeshi Kovacs. I want to make sure I say it right, from the new series on Netflix that did the even though season 2 kind of sucked.
Altered Carbon.
Yeah, I hate getting into the details of the season, because I think season 1 felt so cyberpunk, and season 2 just felt so like drama. Like the writers were really like stroking their egos and lost sight of the style over substance a little too much, and they got a little too much in the substance over the style, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, he's a great solo. I think one of my favorite all-time ones from back, and that's one of the more newer ones. But Aeon Flux has always been like, I absolutely love Aeon Flux. I have the complete series on DVD that I got so long ago. I first saw it when it was being featured on like Liquid Television on an MTV way back in the day, like the 90s or something. But yeah, I love Aeon Flux because I love the smart, stylized way that she kills and does things and seduces people. It's absolutely got that 007 vibe, which is another sort of solo feeling character. And then that movie, Leon the Professional. I really love that movie, classic from back in the day. The hitman guy that ends up protecting the girl, which was like Natalie Portman back in the day. Love that movie. But those are the main things that pop in my head for like different stylized ways. What do you think? What comes into your mind as far as solo and examples from like movie, TV, comics, and books?
For me, you know, Motoko from Ghost in the Shell and Bato.
Yeah.
Even though they are government agents, they are soldiers, and I think they are more solo than lawmen, right? So those like are for me were the ultimate solos of the cyberpunk genre. Just because, you know, they had great weapons, they had cool tech, and you know, they got the job done.
And I like how you mentioned, even though it has that lawman vibe, because you're thinking, okay, government worker. But I agree with you. I think there's a definite difference between like a lawman who I'll associate with like a cop or even a detective or something, you know, because like a private eye or something might bend the rules a little more than a cop per se. But well, that's not true if you're a fucked up cop. But I do think that there's a difference when you start stepping into like that CIA, FBI, government agent side. It has way more of that 007, like I'm definitely breaking the rules. I live by my own rules that you don't even know yet. You've never read them because you're not part of this agency. You know, it absolutely feels more solo than lawman. I agree with you.
Yep. And also think about even in Johnny Mnemonic, right? You had Jane and her character, and I think Johnny Mnemonic kind of showed like gutter punk, right? She was a solo who's trying to get good tech or trying to make it big, right? In the world, and she's got garbage tech, and you know the whole premise of that movie around cyberware being kind of disease, right? And her constantly looking to you know, basically get the big score. So I thought her character in that movie was pretty good and straight on as like a low level solo. Shinobi 233, Dune and Newt and Barrios from Appleseed.
Oh yeah.
They kind of I see them as solos because they are, you know, war veterans, but they're also, I think they started off as solos and then became lawmen.
And you see Furious George mentioned Deckard from Blade Runner is solo-ish.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, solo-ish. And then even though like Captain Marks is more of a lawman for us, like, see, exactly, I agree with that. Just like when I was doing the Nomad deep dive and going over like Mad Max, it's got that multi-class feel, like, yeah, lawman, but total Nomad vibe, just like I feel with Deckard, you know, lawman, but that solo vibe. Rook, Corbin Dallas in Fifth Element seems like a retired solo. Absolutely, yeah. Either retired lawman, multi-classed into a retired solo. Definitely that old school salty, like, been there, done that, I'm too old for this and they're pulling me back in vibe, you know, like, yep. Yeah, I love it.
Matt Damon's character in Elysium.
Oh, yeah.
Could have been a solo, right? Again, a low level, trying to, you know, break the system. And I think some of these characters you can definitely see in the moral compass, right? Of, hey, I'm out to get the bad guys, or I'm in it for the money. You definitely see those archetypes within these movies.
Yeah, and I had the thought here, I'm switching up Sirenscape a little bit, going to hit some melee on the dance floor. So now, like, people must have they ran out of some bullets and now they're slinging some blades. Just so anybody's listening, watch a shout out to Sirenscape again. Also, shout out to Cyberfight Clothing, one of my other sponsors. Really love those guys and what they're doing. We got discount codes on our site if anybody's interested in gearing up. The other thing I wanted to mention with a solo, I think would be kind of interesting in an archetype, is playing it pacifist style, like in a way, and not like, you know, traveling monk, so to speak, like, you know, doesn't like it but will defend myself. But I wonder if there'd be a way to like play it 100% pacifist, right? Like your weapon is persuasion and things like that, but not falling into like the fixer and other things, like still using your combat sense, obviously, like in the roll ability. And again, I don't want to get too much into the crunch. There's a lot of things to like add more damage, aim better, but maybe you focus more on deflecting damage to you or all those sort of perceptive bonuses you get as a solo, and you rely more on like your tongue, being, you know, sharp, you know what I mean? And things like that. But I was wondering, you know, if there'd be a way to play a solo as a full-on pacifist and not just to be a different role that's typically like the face. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting. Because I've seen stuff like, you know, where solos will be like, I hate guns, I only use blades, or I only use guns, or like I don't, you know, I only do this type, or martial arts, or like, and I love that. I love stylized solos, but I was thinking, man, if you could push it so extreme to be completely outside the box, thinking like completely pacifist, and you use your words as a weapon, is there a way to pull that off and not just be a fucking rocker boy or something? You know what I mean?
I don't know if a solo would be really geared towards a complete pacifist.
I guess it couldn't be 100%, right? You know?
Yeah. I think it can be still a non-lethal solo, right? Like Captain Mark says, you know, there are non-lethal weapons. The stunner is equal to damage to the heavy pistol.
Look at the rubber bullets.
Still use that.
Bullets. Yeah, I was going over that in my my ammo crash course, and like, you know, at first thought, you're like, when would I ever use rubber bullets in Cyberpunk? Like, why would you get this? But absolutely, if you're trying to like take someone out but not kill them, you know, you just want to render them immobile or unconscious or something, you know.
Yeah, and then there's also martial arts that to subdue the person.
Oh, yeah,
so there's definitely ways
choke them out. You know, 3 successful chokes and they're unconscious. You know.
So I think you can be non-lethal. I don't think you can be a complete pacifist.
Yeah, I think you're right. Let It Coffee, a Batman type of character. Yeah, Batman. I guess he's a solo because he's, even though lawman, you know, being the good guy, you know, his moral compass is like that lawman side of things, but absolutely solo because he's, you know, he's breaking the laws and he's living by his own, you know.
Yep. And you can't forget the first solo, who I believe was Molly from Neuromancer.
Oh, yeah.
And not only was she in that trilogy, but she was in, I think, another trilogy by Gibson. If you haven't read Gibson, please do.
Yeah,
he is definitely a cyberpunk inspiration.
Big time. Back on when I was mentioning about the pacifist thing, Medulliolis OT, hopefully I'm saying that right. I completely butchered that, but it says vicious mockery. You know, the whole D&D like words hurt sort of thing. You know, psychic. If psychic damage would be a thing, why not? Like, you know, like then you could be full on pacifist. You know, some type of like words hurt. They actually reduce your HP and ablate armor if you're making fun of them hard enough, I guess. But yeah, I think that's, you know, that's some great examples, you know, of some good archetypes and ways that you can kind of play your solo. Again, you know, no matter what, even if you're playing on the pacifist side, if you're trying to do right, just solo being a solo, you're gonna have to get a little bit violent sometimes because it's in the title, you know, as far as like your job, because you're either going to be protecting or hunting or, you know, it's always going to be something that's going to involve some type of physical violence or something along those lines. But yeah, if anybody thinks of any other examples, any movie things, TV series, absolutely drop them in the chat. But let's move on to recommended stats and skills. And this kind of plays into, you know, what type of solo you're going to play. I think like when I was mentioning about different skills and stat stuff, when I was talking about the pacifist side of a solo, it just, again, makes me think of the fact that a solo is always going to have to be involved with things like that. Obviously, the number 2 skills you think of with solo is reflex and dexterity, aside from body. And that just depends on if you're trying to play the beefier or more evasive type of character, because maybe body isn't as important if you have really good reflex and dexterity, you know? What do you think as far as recommended stats?
It depends on what kind of solo you're playing, right? If you're going to be playing kind of a person who uses ranged weapons more, yeah, reflex and dex. If you're looking to play more hand-to-hand, then you definitely want to bump up your body and your will, so that way you have more hit points when you start getting into melee combat and fighting. So I think it's a combination of those 4 stats and what kind of solo you want to play. But if you're playing also like a bounty hunter, well, you also need to have detective skills, right? And look into increasing your intelligence and as well. So you can do, the research and looking for those bounties. In my current 2020 game, I have a bounty hunter guy, and he often is looking for various bounties. And again, his skill rolls are more towards streetwise, library search, and skills that aren't necessarily combat oriented. So always take that into consideration on what kind of role or archetype you're trying to go with your solo.
Yeah, I feel like anytime I've ever done, a solo that's had some of that sort of, deduction and library search and some of those kind of intelligence skills to help, because maybe he is more on the hunting side of things or detective side of soloing, I guess. So soloing as it's an adjective or a verb. But if I feel that if you do that, you have to, pick at least one of, either the ranged or the melee, the martial arts. You're good at brawling, something along those lines. Because obviously you can't be good at everything, but if you're going to put, some effort in the intelligence side of that stuff, then you pick at least one side of that violent stuff, whether, you're attacking or protecting, so to speak. And when it comes to, like, if I ever don't worry about the intelligence side as much, and I'm more focused on being the typical solo and focusing on what a solo is good at, I always feel that reflex and dexterity, especially with the way red works, just goes hand in hand. Because even if you're going to be, okay, I don't plan on shooting people a lot, I'm just going to do martial arts, right? So I'm focused on dexterity or melee. I'm not worried about guns as much. But, you're up close and you're going to have to evade, which is your dexterity and your evasion. But if people are shooting at you, the only way that you can evade that sort of shit is if your reflex is 8 or higher. So to me, if you want to take advantage of that really high dex, you're going to want at least an 8 in reflex to take advantage of that when people are shooting at you, if that's your thing. And again, if you're going to be into shooting and you have that high dexterity, then you have the ability to dodge and use that dex. So if that's your main focus, why not have the high dex? Because you can rely on it when you need to evade because your reflex is that high. So again, I think whether you're looking at it from the dexterity or from the reflex point of view, both kind of go hand in hand because of the way that they work together, at least in red.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I can see your point with the reflex. You want eye to kind of dodge bullets, but I haven't played long enough to really concentrate on those numbers and how much of a benefit evasion really is. And again, I think it's situational. When it comes to basically dodging bullets and what the numbers are, right? So if you are going to do more melee, you definitely want to concentrate more on your dex. And yes, reflex can kind of take a sideline because those are more towards range weapons skills. However, even for a person or for a solo who is more range weapons, right? You can't ignore dex because dex also has other things like stealth and athletics. So those rolls you still might have to make to get where you're going, right? Even if you care about your firearms. So it's kind of a juggling act, right?
Oh, it absolutely
trying to figure it out.
No, I think you mentioned something else. Is like the stealth side of it made me think of the fact that like anytime you play a solo with that sort of fighting character, because let's not forget, with red, each role has their own role ability and kind of leans towards certain things, and a solo absolutely leans towards fighting. Look at their role ability, but anybody can put a lot into fighting skills and still be awesome at that shit. But I think that anytime that you do that sort of thing, you kind of decide, like, am I being the type of fighter that has really, really amazing at my weapons and guns to the point, like, I'm not worried about being stealthy. I'm confrontational. I intimidate people. I'm persuasive in that sense. Like, I just walk into a room like, dude, I could kill you, Or am I more stealthy? Am I like a ninja? Like, yeah, I can still kill you, but I'm going to be real tactful. I'm going to be creeping around the shadows and, like, am I more like that rogue style, fighter, or am I more like that barbarian style fighter? Not to bring in like D&D references, but you know what I mean? Like, it absolutely stylizes the solo in my mind. Like, am I creeping around like a ninja and being, tactful in my approach, or am I coming in like a fucking tank and just kicking down a door like, what's up? Taste my blade,
And I think that also plays into your other skills, right? And what you're going to select for those skills. Like, are you a special ops? So you might have to take some demolitions. Tech skill might not be high, but you might need that. You also might need pick lock, right? If you're an assassin, right? And think of what an assassin has to do. If you're a bodyguard for a corporate, well, you need to dress the part, so you need to, work on your wardrobe and style, also your personal grooming, and in those situations as a bodyguard, you also want to have some human perception, right? Make sure that there's people not lying, or determine whether or not there's a guy who's very nervous when he starts approaching your client. And even like, a fun skill is like even lip reading, right? To read what conversations are happening across the way. So a lot of those espionage type of games, you also need to look into those skills as well.
Yeah, great point. Kira over here in the chat says reflex is also your initiative. Yeah, it's going to affect your initiative there. Going first is a huge deal in red. Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. So that's a good point to make too, is that as a solo and being the one who's going to typically jump into combat first, or hopefully, like, I mean, if you have a team and the solo's letting you step into combat first as like a media or exec, then you might want to have a conversation with your solo. But yeah, typically they're jumping into the battle first, and like reflex is important just for initiative. Yeah, it's not only firing weapons, but just giving you the jump on everybody, so to speak,
Yep. And speaking of that, I don't know if you want to start getting into the roll ability.
We can,
or solos.
Yeah, we can chat about it a little. Like I said, I dive into those crash courses. I really explain how the roll ability works and what it is.
Right.
But we can chat about it a bit. I think it kind of goes hand in hand with, recommended skills and stats. The other thing I wanted to mention though too, as a solo, like recommended skills. I always think like don't just rely on brawling. Absolutely get into a martial art. Picking one of the 4 types that's currently available is very important. Look at the special abilities. Each one has like 2 special moves or whatever, and some of those have prerequisites that might be determined by your stats or certain things. So that's important too, I think, is a solo being proficient in the martial arts and then picking one of the 4 that makes the most sense based on the stats and skills. But what were you going to say? What was that?
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but you kind of need, for some of the martial arts, you need brawling to do, especially if there's any grappling involved. From my understanding of the rules is that you need brawling for grappling. Grabbing.
Brawl. You don't need brawling for martial arts, but you use brawling skill when it comes to grappling, regardless if you have martial arts. If you don't have martial arts, then you rely on brawling for punching and kicking and stuff as well. You know what I mean? And everybody starts off with a +2 in brawling anyways. It's just natural life skills. So no matter what, you can always punch and kick using your brawling. You always use it for grapple. But I feel like as a solo, you should absolutely don't rely on brawling for punching and kicking. Get a martial arts. It cuts the armor in half, rounded up, which brawling doesn't do, and you get those special moves, which is amazing.
Yep.
But what were you going to say about rollability stuff?
So when I was reviewing like the various roll abilities, and the roll abilities are damage deflection, fumble recovery, initiative reaction, precision attack, and spot weakness. So like for me, reviewing some of these, I saw that like, you know, damage deflection is kind of like pseudo armor, right? In which you can absorb some damage per round to help. And some of them have their benefits, and some of them have, you know, again, the damage deflection, depending upon your armor and what you're facing, you know, will always be circumstantial in whether you're going to use it. But for me, the one thing that about the fumble recovery, right? So I know there's quite a few referees out there who have home rules about fumble and luck, right? So even I have my own home rules on how to use luck and how to deal with fumbles to eliminate a fumble. So one of the problems you'll encounter with fumble recovery is if the GM does allow you to spend a certain amount of luck to avoid a fumble, that kind of takes away that whole attribute, right? And why put 4 points or have 4 points into it when you can use luck points to get rid of a fumble? So as a referee, you would have to come up with another type of rule to replace it, right? And like my initial thoughts on this when I was reading through this was, yeah, I'm always going to use luck to stop fumbles because that is applied to all players. So how do I address this for solos from a 4 point? So, and 4 points is a big investment into the solos abilities. So my home rule right now, and again, I haven't play tested it completely, but for 4 points, you get to re-roll a fumble every session, right? So if you roll a 1, you get to roll again. And that kind of, it is a big benefit for that ability to happen. But I think for the 4 points and, you know, how I use luck, it kind of compensates for that. And I don't know if you've thought about that, Rob, with any of the home rules you use with like luck getting rid of fumbles.
No, I haven't used luck to get rid of fumbles. So the only sort of, you know, anti-fumble rule has been the fumble recovery aspect of that roll ability. Yeah, I haven't messed with luck helping with any fumbles, and I think that's also because Red doesn't have the same type of like I don't know, detrimental, you know, repercussions of fumbling that like 2020 had. So it doesn't seem as dangerous, you know, like I don't feel the risk. And I mean, we had homebrew stuff too heavy back in the day when I was younger. We had a lot of fun with stuff like that, but there's no like, you know, in Red that you're not going to fumble and accidentally hurt yourself or shoot a member or, you know, a team member by accident or completely break your weapon. The most is like by the quality of weapon, you know, it might jam and you have to use an action to unjam it, or you're going to fumble and deduct the second rolling from your total score. So it's not like a direct pain. So I guess I haven't really felt the need to add more ways out of it, I guess. But I like that idea. I like the, you know, using the luck to get out of a fumble. It makes sense, you know, just by definition of, you know, what luck is and what it is supposed to be like in a game. Like you use it and it's supposed to be like in real life, like your natural luck. You're just being lucky. You get to get by in a certain way. So I do like the idea in that of, you know, get away from that one. But then, like you said, you have to make those 4 points make sense, because then it throws the balance off a little, makes that a bit redundant otherwise. Do you when you do the reroll with the 4 points, is that, you know, once in a session and then they reset it, or once within that combat? Oh, okay.
To begin with, right? And then, you know, again, I haven't fully play tested it. You know, I mean, I definitely have some severe luck rules when it came to 2020, mainly because I kind of most of my players used it as a dump stat because they thought there was really no benefit to adding 1 or 2 points to a skill roll. So I actually expanded kind of the luck rules
Nice.
that I think other people have done. You can actually check those rules out on my site.
Yeah, I'm gonna have anybody watching too. I'll have the link to Cybersmily's site in the description. I mean, it's super easy to know what it is, but I'll have it in there for the archive and everything. Just easy for people to click through.
Yeah, and I've always associated luck kind of with, luck. So if there is a fumble, I have a high luck, so maybe I should use some points to not fumble as much, right? Because I am a lucky person, as opposed to the dice roll dictating it. Right? So as a bad dice roller, an unlucky dice roller, I could roll several runs right in a row, which can doesn't reflect a 10 luck or an 8 luck,
Right.
Exactly. So that was always my justification on how I used luck.
I like that. The way you just worded it, I like that a lot. That made me feel it, the concept of those rules sitting in real world application a lot better. That was awesome, the way you worded it. And yeah, there's cybersmily.net right there in the chat too. Anybody on Twitch, you got the link there from Capricious Nature.
Thank you, Capricious.
Yeah, there's one other thing I was going to say. When it comes to luck, one other thing that I have used it for is the same way I do, like I've done cool checks and intelligent checks. I've mentioned it in other videos how I do it. I do this with luck as well. Like sometimes in intelligence, I'll have them roll a 1d10. As long as they're under their intelligence, they might remember something. Like if there's something going on and it was mentioned in a previous session and none of the players are picking up on it, they're not like naturally meta remembering the shit from previous sessions. I'll have them do an intelligence check. I'll go, hey, your character remembers that from this, I'll do the same thing with luck sometimes. If they're trying to do something that's beyond just a skill, like, okay, yeah, I can pick lock the door so they can get into the room, but is the item going to be in there that they're looking for? Because it's not in my notes, it's one of the rooms they just went in on the side. It has nothing to do with the campaign, the session. I have to move things to make it work, so it's one of those things that's just, in the moment. And sometimes I will do a luck check, like a 1d10, see if it's under the luck, to see if they're lucky enough to have whatever they're trying to have happen. You know what I mean?
Yep. And that's when you start doing things like that with luck, because luck is and again, sorry for sidetracking off of solos, but luck, when you do things like that and the player doesn't know that when he first goes in, you're doing these type of checks and rules, and tries to use it as a dump stat, it gets to be very comical at times.
Oh yeah.
Especially if they have a 1 roll, a 1 in the. Actually, you can only have a 2 in red, but still, forcing them to make a luck roll and the rest of the party looking at that player and being like, "Oh, geez, here we go."
Yeah. I like when a player leans into that a bit though too, like on the opposite end of that conversation, like Wandering DM plays in one of my monthly Cyberpunk Red games, and we're actually that's the team I'm playing this Wednesday, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard, right here. Anybody watching, make sure you tune in just 2 days. We'll be running that game. But he plays like an ex-cop, salty dude, and he's a lawman, but he said he purposely just left his luck all the way down to 2 to reflect his shitty life path and his history of like his character is just unlucky. And I love that. I love that he like leaned into it and made it like, oh, my luck is that low because my character is unlucky. And like, it's not just like that dump statter thing. It's like part of the character. Like he knows how luck can be used and he chose like, this is my character. And like, I love that. And yeah, shout out to Rook in chat. He's playing it in that team too. He's Looper. He's one of the media there. He says, "Be there." Well, you better be there. We're streaming it. But yeah, I think we rocked archetypes of recommended stats and skills. Obviously, we tore through the life path, which was a lot of fun. Anybody in chat, if you have any questions, put them out there. I know we've kind of already been rocking into the questions section and just chatting about solos and about anything. keep in mind, I'd love it to be about solos. That's what this deep dive is. But anybody in chat, if you just have general questions for us, especially for Will here, you got Cybersmily, the guy who created cybersmily.net. If you have any questions for him in particular, go for it as well. But I think is solo, is that one of your all-time favorite roles, or was it when you were younger? It always seems like, like the first role people choose or get into, especially when you're younger. It's the ultimate badass, right?
Actually, my first 2 characters were medtechs.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So I have played a couple solos over my time, and again, I'm in Reservoir Pandas game. I am playing their solo. So solos can be fun, because most, depending upon the game, right? If it's combat oriented, yes, you're gonna have a blast as a solo. But if you start getting into a little more role playing, and you're not have a character for that role playing, it can be tough. So I think my all-time favorite role probably would have been the Netrunner. Even the old school ones with the complicated, game within a game.
Yeah.
And I always liked that kind of character, which is a tough character to play in a game, especially if you're off dealing on the net and, But for our teams, we were always able to get the Netrunner involved. Like, for example, my current 2020 game, the majority of there's only one solo, and he's a bounty hunter. The rest of the team is just techies, Netrunner, media, and one other. I don't remember.
I like that, though. I like a nice, well-rounded team that leans heavily into the role-playing, especially as a streamer. If you've seen any of the teams I run, some of the best moments are when people are, everyone's in character and either reacting to a scene or an NPC or a situation, something, and they're all interacting, talking to each other and dealing with it in character. And it has nothing to do with combat, just heavy role playing. And those are some of my favorite moments, absolutely, at the table. We do have a question here from Shinobi233. Says, what is good starting gear for a solo? And I think that's, that can go in any direction here, because like we talked about the archetypes, it depends on how you're playing your solo. First and foremost, I think general gear for a solo, regardless if you're playing the melee, the ranged weapon, the martial artist, or whatever type of solo, no matter what, I think general gear for a solo to have would be stuff depending on if you have cyber eyes with teleoptics and stuff, you're going to want some binoculars, you're going to want some handcuffs or zip ties for people that you're interrogating, some duct tape. What else? What are some general things? No matter what type of solo, every solo should have. What are some good things here?
You're always going to want at least some good armor. Whether or not you want to get into armor that gives you stat penalties, that's a tough one, right?
I guess that's when it comes into play. Am I playing the stealthy ninja style martial artist, or am I playing the tank that doesn't give a fuck? Then maybe you might get some of that armor that gives a little penalties to the move stat and to your decks and things, where you're not worried about being stealthy or moving long distances. You're just going to kick in the door and lay down the damage,
Yep.
But that's a great point. Armor. Anti-smog mask. Rook says, mask.
Anti-smog mask.
It's a good one.
Most of my solos, when I play them, I do cyber optics, anti-dazzler, because I'd rather not go blind, and low light.
Absolutely.
The first thing you should always do is take out any light sources. Yep. Just to improve those penalties, not only for your opponent to hit you, but yes, it's going to affect you. But if you got your, night vision goggles on, or your night vision cybernetics, you're not going to have to worry about those penalties.
Exactly. Great point.
But gas masks. are also good.
Yeah, and I think and Capricious Nature's got to get back to classes. Thanks for tuning in. Always love your support, man. I'll see you on the Discord, and hopefully you'll be tuning into. I have an interview tomorrow, tentatively planned with the owner of Modifius to talk about some Fallout and Dune gameplay that we're going to be starting up soon. So hopefully everybody can tune into that tomorrow. It should be at like noon Pacific Standard, I believe. If nothing else, Wednesday's gameplay will be the next time I'll be streaming if tomorrow's interview doesn't pan out. But aside from those general things that I think every solo should have, and I think those are great things to mention, like I said, there's some specifics that I think come down to the way you're playing your solo. You know, if you're going to be that stealthy ninja style character, maybe you're not worried about a lot of guns, a rifle, a submachine gun, or pistol of any kind, but you're worried more about having a sword or blade or pop-up melee blade, quiet weapons like that, things that are light, things that aren't ranged. Or maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you're a sharpshooter and you're more into the ranged attack, in which case maybe you have the sniper rifle strapped to your back next to the shotgun with the pistol in the holster and the submachine gun around the other side of you, so you're at any range, you're ready to throw some bullets. So yeah, I think there's the general items that every solo should have, and then when it comes to like weapons and cyberware, you're going to get specific based on the type of solo you're playing.
Yep. And for me, when it comes to a solo, smart gun is always seen by solos, and some type of speedwear to boost your initiative, because if you go first, you're the one who's probably going to live longer. But when it comes to speedwear, there's two, right? Which is the Sandevistan, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And they have the old one? Kerensivkov. I would not use the Sandevistan, mainly because it requires you to take an action. And if you play in certain games, some referees don't have you roll initiative from round to round. So to waste, you basically have to have an action to activate it, and then it only lasts for a minute. So you have to know that you're going to be in combat prior to the initiative roll to actually get the benefits. Whereas the other one gives you a flat +2 all the time. So always keep those in mind. One is more expensive a humanity loss, so hopefully your empathy is doing well when you start purchasing that. But again, compared to the 2020, now you have the ability to use therapy to kind of reduce that. So get some therapy as a solo.
Yeah, and Frankie McSpank says healing drugs. That is a good kind of general character thing to have as a solo. But, not forgetting that in Red, the speed heal and such, you have to have a med tech give that to you. By give, I mean apply it to you. What's the word I'm looking for? Administer it to you. You can't, you can't grab those med tech drugs. That stim pack, speed heal, whatever that little chart under the med tech roll. Not coming to mind all of them, but speed heal is one of them. All those things, the med tech has to administer it to you. They know how to use the air hypo and where to put it and how to do it. But it wouldn't hurt as a solo to have those things, like whether there's a med tech on your team that can give it to you, or you're just out and about and you gotta, I need a doctor, like here, inject this into me, that sort of thing. Healing drugs would be a good thing to have as a solo because, like we've said, you're going to be in combat.
Yep. And radios. Don't ever forget radios.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, you have your phone, but a radio is a much better option because you can sub-vocalize. And if you're getting into a specialized solo, you definitely want to look into, lockpicking equipment. If you're a bodyguard, you might want to look into bug detectors and other things of that nature.
Yeah, PWB says, okay, then a secondary role in medtech. So yeah, if you multi-class from as a medtech into a solo, then you can administer your own healing drugs into yourself. That's a great idea. Yeah, and when it comes to solo, I think me personally, anytime that I have played a solo, or when I think of when I will again, because I know eventually again I will play. I'm not only going to be a GM my whole life, but I like the idea of a solo with some of those specific skills like lock picking. I want to be stealthy. Anytime I've played a solo, I've been more of that like tactful ninja style solo, more rogue like than tank like, you know. I'm less the barbarian and more the rogue, more like breaking in, sneaking around, you know, just being tactful, like you said, shooting, you know, taking out the lights or the electricity and then relying on my night vision and other skills to get the advantage on other people that don't have that. Things like that. Yeah, I would be good at fighting if I was going to lean on fighting in any of the solos I've ever played, or when I think about future ones, you know, more into the martial arts, more into sharpshooting if I'm going to do it. Probably if I was going to do melee, it would have to be more stylized. So like if I'm going to do that, I'm going to full on take like that ninja persona, you know. But generally speaking, fixer has always been my favorite role. But when I play it, I always play it like as a sharpshooter or something along those lines, because that's my favorite part of a solo when it comes to that combat is, you know, having like not maybe being proficient in every weapon, but having like that heavy pistol that I'm just like shooting flies off of the ass of a cat like a mile away style shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually turned to what the book suggests for equipment for a solo. Yeah, it doesn't really give you too much. An agent,
Yeah.
clothes, and mirror shades.
Right.
That's all you need to do to be a solo.
Mirror shades number one. Yeah. How did we forget that? Every solo has to have mirror shades.
I look over at MedTech outfit and like they have like handcuffs as one of the equipments a MedTech will need. I'm like, that's interesting.
Yeah. I guess for unruly patients, you know, you're trying to administer a drug and they're getting rowdy or something. But again, like that should definitely be in the solos pocket. Like I said, every solo I've ever played always has like duct tape and zip ties in their backpack, some rope, maybe a chain, you know, shit like that, you know, a crowbar.
A large duffel bag too.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep all your weapons in it as well.
That's true. And eventually, like, you know, you start doing enough gigs, you make enough money, you're going to have that weapon safe hidden in the wall of your flat or wherever you're living.
Exactly.
PWB, a reliable partner, coworker, or past friend is a good thing to have. Absolutely. That's funny. That's funny to me. That's got to be a joke answer, because that's like obvious. Like you're in Cyberpunk, you're in Night City. I think the most valuable thing to have is a reliable partner, somebody you can trust. You know, because that's absolutely rare.
Yep.
Yeah, he laughed at that one. I think he agrees. Shinobi, a spec ops solo, special ops. Like that's you know, my favorite type. Yeah, of solo. Although, you know, it might be fun, you know, when I think about it, to play that tank style. I've never done it because it's not as appealing to me. But then the more I think about it, it might be kind of fun to role play that out if you're playing like a tank style solo that's just so badass. Like everywhere you go, you're just like breaking doors off hinges and like, sorry. You know, like you're just like that badass like tank that's almost like a 2 in intelligence. You know what I mean? Like, but you're just a tank. Like that might be kind of fun to play out. You know, always trying to intimidate. Could get you into some rough situations though, being like that.
And again, I think that would be perfect for like a C-SWAT. Campaign, right? Because I firmly believe that C-SWAT isn't just made up by lawmen. There are solos in that group, as well as some of the other roles, like a med tech. So you'd have lawmen, med tech, So you could create a campaign on a team of sea SWATs
And I feel like
battling cyber psychos.
Yeah, sea SWAT to me, like now that you mention it, it almost can't be a mix like that. Like when you think of trauma team, they've got the mix, right? You know, like the doctors and shit, but then they have security and stuff, you know. But I feel like with sea SWAT, when you're dealing with cyber psychos, like I feel all of sea SWAT needs to be like multi-class. Like they're lawmen solos, right? But then they also have to have like a third multi-class. Like to be in sea SWAT, you at least have to be up to like, you know, rank 8 minimum. So you've had at least that first 4 ranks as like maybe a med tech or a nomad, so you can drive, something like that. But then you've had to have at least put in 4 years as a lawman, and you have to be a solo. So you have to be beyond that 8 rank mark, because it's every 4 ranks that you can multi-class. So I picture every sea SWAT member has to be what, at least above rank 8 to be at least have some solo, some lawman, and then some other type of multi-class that makes sense that they would need on the team, whether it be med tech or something. Yeah, sea SWAT seems like it would be that serious, that intense to me.
Yeah, it definitely would be intense. But I also, you know, so sea SWAT is not just, you know, the veterans. They also take in, you know, the crazies, right? So I think, you know, yeah, if you're doing an elite force, but I can see starting players having that mix and coming in, whether they're, you know, and depending upon your campaign, right? So you could have like, what is it? The prison work unit, right? Who have to form in sea SWAT. What was that? Cyber City 80?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So those guys were kind of like sea SWAT, and they were all criminals.
Yeah.
With the neck collars, right? So it's not necessarily in, you know, the people who are doing it because they want to do it are probably, you know, the elite. Whereas the ones who are forced to do it, you know, might be schleps off the street, right? That they're paying off for whatever crime they did in their past that they need to now make amends and work it off.
But even if it is that, they have to be badasses though, because like just going into dealing with cyber psychos, like
True.
even if it's like district or city PD or the government, like just throw them in, they're expendable. They still want to take out the cyber psycho. They don't want them. They're fucking up the city and killing the innocent. So they at least got to be somewhat a badass. And I love PWB says play some media on a sea SWAT ride along. That would be fun. That would be so funny. I'm taking that fucking idea and I'm going to do something similar like that in an upcoming stream. I'm also interested in doing a themed campaign like what Capricious is doing for us with all the nomads, doing one where maybe everyone is a multi-class starting at like level 10 or 12, where like they've been a lawman for 4 years, then a solo for 4 ranks, I should say. And now they're stepping into whatever niche within sea SWAT, whether they're med tech, media covering the promos, nomad covering the driving, things like that, maybe exec handling the business side of it, or tracking as like more of soloing. I really like that themed group idea for that. That sounds really fun. And Furious George says, kind of off topic, but why did R. Talsorian make the Ripper Doc? Why didn't they make a Ripper Doc main role or a life path? I agree. That's such a great role. And I have a med tech in one of my other monthly streams. I just did our session 0, and Greg from How to Drink. If anyone's seen How to Drink on YouTube, he's the one that created the Johnny Silverhand drink that they actually mimicked the look of in the video game from. But he's playing a med tech in my stream in that team, and he's a Ripper Doc. Yeah, I kind of went that route. But I agree. I think Artal Sorian should have, you know, put even more into it. And I mean, even as you can see today, look at our deep dive today when we talk about LifePath, how Cybersmily was kicking out different ideas within the, you know, beyond just the 6 within categories. And like, absolutely, if you spend some time, you can expand all these things. But I imagine with Artal Sorian, eventually, you know, you have to, what's the word? You have to put, you know, a cork in it and call it done or whatever. Like, you know, eventually they have to say, okay, let's sell this version and we'll just put that stuff into the next Chromebook or the next whatever. Eventually you have to stop, put out what you have, and just, you know, put the expansions into a new book or something. I'm hoping that's what that means.
Yeah, and Artal Sorian never really addressed the techie, right? The med techie in 2020. So I think, if that book ever made an appearance, Ripper Doc would have been included. And I know that, especially with like Techie, because all the other Splat books kind of expanded the various roles. But we'll see. Maybe our Talsorian will start, coming out with more Splat books for the new version of these roles.
Yeah, and Frankie McSpank says, I think because the stereotypical Ripper Doc is bound to a clinic, our med tech who's playing the Ripper Doc, it's actually portable. They're working out of the RV that the team has. But even prior to getting involved with the team in their RV, he was a mobile Ripper Doc, going to different places and setting up a makeshift, tent or room or whatever he could do in the location, kind of like, Doctors Over the Border style thing, but like going to combat zones in different places and just being that med tech, that Ripper Doc in that sense. So don't always have to be bound to a clinic, but it does make sense stereotypically. When you think Ripper Doc, you think that they're in some back alley clinic or some shit that they run. Yeah, absolutely.
And Rook asks, what's a role that we think that might be weird or not believable for a solo to multi-class into? Honestly, I don't think.
I think that in Cyberpunk they could be in any role.
Yeah.
Because it's inherently violent in this world. So like their history of being a solo or multi-classing into or from any role can work in my mind, unless I'm not thinking of one. But even in exec, something you would think like they could get into that, start focusing on the skills. Even if their intelligence is low, focus on the skills side of those intelligent checks and things, and build those up to the point like, what, I'm an exec now, I'm smart enough to do it, but it's my background in being a badass that helps me intimidate people to respect me in the corporate world. It could be, maybe they're threatening. Even on that level, I can think of it. Solo.
And like for like. Even getting into media, right? You could be a war correspondent, right?
Oh, yeah.
And like we said, media who rides along with C-SWAT.
Yeah, I really like that idea.
And the media can get implanted into anywhere, right? From corporation, and when we're talking about combat, right? So at least from 2020, the corporations that were combat were Arasaka Militech, So they're going to probably have a media doing propaganda for them, right? Showing, hey, these are what our soldiers can do, and here's some, do some live footage. But there's also, the Lazarus Group. I don't know if that survived into Red. But you also had like Orion, which was basically a counter-terrorist corporation. And that's one of the medias in my current game that used to work for that team. But that's something that you could always work into from a solo point of view. And I think we already talked about Rockers being, a professional fighter, whether it's a professional wrestler, professional boxer, MMA champion. Fixers, right? So like with what Rob was saying with fixers and execs, right? The solo could have been somebody who's getting promoted into the organization, whether it's a legal corporation, right? So I'm becoming a corporate, going up that ladder, or into the seedier side and becoming a fixer, right? Look at Rogue, right? She was a solo in 2020, and in 2077 she became a fixer. Or it's actually probably in Red she's a fixer right now. So I don't think too many details were raised on that. Lawmen, again, we talked about the C-SWAT and mixing them. Netrunner solo, I could see a mix of that, right? So you're a combat operative doing infiltration work, right? And maybe you need some net running skill.
Especially in Red, because it's no longer remotely done. You have to be within 6 meters of an access point. It's AR and not VR. Like, you're still in meat space dodging bullets and getting attacked while you're net running. So absolutely a solo net runner makes sense.
right? And medtech is a combat medic. Nomads, again, the solo, the multi-class would have been, you know, some type of guard or protector of the family. And techie, right? So techie might be, again, similar to Netrunner, right? A combat operative who needs to go in, plant demolitions, hack into the systems. Techies also are good for, you know, creating the various gear, making sure everything's working properly. So, yeah, I don't see any weird combinations.
Yeah.
I think
it
they
works.
have lots. Yeah.
And Rook says he's imagining a solo multi-classing into being an exec and having a solo employee that's their protege. Absolutely.
Yep.
You know, he's one of their corporate guards, like looking up to him, you know. That's funny. Look at the president of Russia. You know, used to be KGB and shit. And look at him now, fucking running the whole country. Yeah, I think we nailed it, man. I think it was a great solo deep dive. Unless there's any other solo specific questions coming from chat in the next minute, I'm going to call it. I think we did a great job, man, of diving into the life path. I love that you had, you know, extra ideas for each life path section. Getting into the different archetypes was a lot of fun. The different ways that you can play a solo, you know, depending on what you're focused on, and thus, you know, what stats and skills. I think we got to talk a lot about that. And the dynamic ways that this can fit into a team. The multi-classing aspect was a lot of fun to chat about. I think it was probably one of the better deep dives that I've done. I love all of them. They're always so much fun. But I feel with this one, there's a lot of outside the box thinking. I think you brought a lot of really cool thoughts to the table, man. I really appreciate you joining me.
I appreciate you having me, man. It's always good to talk with you.
Hell yeah. Yeah, and anybody in chat that hasn't already, make sure you check out Tales from the Forlorn Dopes that Cybersmily does with Wisdom from Data Fortress. It's an ongoing
Next
series.
Wednesday.
Yep. A lot of fun. I know it was supposed to be this Wednesday, but I've got my monthly stream kind of taken over that day a bit, and the times would have been shifted too much. So now that's going to start next Wednesday and be every other Wednesday from there until we fuck up the schedule again, or until I fuck up the schedule again, I should say. I apologize. But yeah, everybody should tune into that. Check them out. Also, make sure you check out cybersmily.net. I'm going to put the link in the description so everybody can check it out. Aside from that, give me some love and support for Cyberpunk Uncensored. We're doing a lot of shit with this brand. We're pushing a lot of different GMs and gameplay and series and information and free assets and just so much stuff. And I'm getting ready to start pushing some Fallout and some Dune through our partnership with Modifius, as well as some other things I'm working on I can't talk about yet, but just so much stuff going on. I would love your support. You know, give us a follow here on Twitch. Give us a subscribe over on YouTube. Join the Discord server. Let's see. And technically, the media can record the CSWAT operations for later debriefing. Exactly. Yeah, see, there's a little solo multi-classing thing with media. Yeah, a solo multi-class fits in with any other role, and you can make it fit in with CSWAT in fun ways. I think that's a really creative thing to do, and I'm using that media right along that PWB mentioned. That's too funny not to use in a stream. So I'm going to do that somewhere, sometime. It's going to happen. Yeah, I think we killed it, man. Thanks so much for joining me, and thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Cyberpunk Uncensored.